There are times when the universe speaks without a sound, and the simple fact that you're here now is a sign that something inside you is tired of seeking approval, tired of molding yourself to fit into the silences of others, tired of over-explaining, justifying every step, every choice, every emotion. Perhaps you've felt that the more you do for others, the less anyone does for you, that your heart is exhausted, trying to be understood, accepted, validated. And yet the emptiness remains, insistent, deep, almost familiar. Osho said, "When the disciple is ready, even silence speaks." And perhaps this is the moment when silence finally finds you, because there's a kind of weariness that comes not from the body, but from the soul. The weariness of someone who always needs to be good, kind, understanding, even when the world doesn't give the same in return. You feel it, don't you? This feeling of constantly giving away parts of yourself to maintain harmony, to avoid conflict, to avoid being misunderstood. But what if I told you that this search for approval is precisely what keeps you broken? There's a quiet power that arises when you stop begging for recognition, when you stop chasing the gaze of others and begin to see yourself, when the noise of external expectations finally subsides and the sound of your own consciousness begins to emerge. That's when true spiritual power awakens, not the power to dominate, but the power to remain, to be at peace even when the world tries to provoke you. The silence Osho speaks of is not absence, it's total presence. It's when you become so whole within yourself that nothing outside can destabilize you. The words of others no longer hurt you because you no longer need them to exist. Judgments lose their power because you're no longer trying to prove anything. When you choose silence over approval, something profoundly changes in your energy. You cease to be a reflection of others' expectations and become a living presence, conscious, firm, unbreakable. How many times have you tried to be understood and ended up feeling even more alone? How many times have you remained silent for fear of rejection, and yet you were rejected anyway? The truth is, no one can break you when you stop bending, and silence is the beginning of this liberation. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of spiritual maturity, the silence that observes, understands, and chooses not to react. Osho called this witnessing, being present without losing yourself. The human mind has been conditioned to seek approval as a means of survival. From childhood, we're taught to please, to be good, to do what's expected of us. And this habit extends into adulthood, disguised as empathy, kindness, and responsibility. But behind it all lies a deep fear, the fear of not being loved. This fear makes you predictable, always reacting, always explaining yourself, always giving in. It's at this point that people realize they can press your emotional emergency button and control you. But what if suddenly you stopped responding? What if silence were your answer? The minds of others, accustomed to your pattern, would try to decipher what was happening. And in that moment, the power returns to you. Because when you don't react, the game breaks. When you don't seek approval, the other person loses control. And it is precisely in this space of pause that your true strength begins to blossom. There's something profoundly revolutionary about simply not responding, not trying to justify yourself, not defending yourself, not arguing. Silence becomes an invisible shield, and at the same time, a mirror. It reveals the truth that words try to hide. It shows who truly understands you and who merely consumes you. So if this video reached you, perhaps it's because your soul asked for a break from the noise, the expectations, the obligations, a break to remember who you are without having to prove anything. Life has a curious way of calling us inward, and sometimes the call comes disguised as fatigue, loneliness, or misunderstanding. But what you feel now could be the beginning of your awakening. Because no one can break what no longer needs fixing. No one can touch what no longer tries to please. Silence is the state of being that is self-sufficient. And maybe, just maybe, that's the message the universe wanted to deliver to you today. If this resonated with you, stay with me, because there is still something profound you need to hear about this invisible power that is born when the soul chooses silence. Before continuing, pause, not just to listen, but to feel. What you've heard so far isn't just any video, it's a reminder. Silence is where your soul breathes. If this message touched you, write in the comments, "I choose the silence that strengthens me." This isn't just a comment, it's a commitment to your peace. When you write, you affirm to yourself that you are choosing awareness, not reaction. If it made sense to you, leave it not out of habit, but as a sign that you're ready to live with more presence. And if you're not yet part of our community, subscribe here. Each video is a step within yourself. Take a deep breath, sit down, because now you'll understand how silence not only protects you, but completely changes the way the world reacts to you. Have you ever noticed that the more you try to please others, the more people seem to demand of you? It's as if your kindness becomes an invitation to abuse, as if your constant availability tells the world, you can use me, I can handle it. And at first, you believe this is love, empathy, the right thing to do, but little by little you realize you're getting lost in a maze of expectations. With every yes you say to someone else, there's a silent no being said to yourself. You get used to being everyone's support, their shoulder, their emotional lifeline, and without realizing it, you become something Osho would call a reflection, not a presence. When you live to be accepted, your essence dissolves. You cease to be a living consciousness and become a character in someone else's script. Always predictable, always available, always the one who understands, who supports, who forgives. But what happens when no one does the same for you? When the whole world seems to revolve around what you offer and not what you feel? That's when silence becomes necessary, because there comes a point when even the sound of your own words tires you. You hear yourself explaining, justifying yourself, trying to make the other person see your intentions, and still nothing changes. So you stop. This stopping isn't giving up, it's sacred exhaustion. It's when the soul says, enough begging for understanding. And in that moment, true silence is born. Osho said that the person who seeks approval lives from the outside in, and therefore is always divided. He is what others want him to be, and never what he truly is. This division creates pain, creates anxiety, creates the emptiness you feel even after doing everything right. It's the emptiness of someone who isn't living their own life, just playing a role. How many times have you felt like your worth was in someone else's hands, that you needed someone else's validation to feel enough? This is the quietest addiction there is, the addiction to approval. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It disguises itself as humility, care, love, but deep down, it's fear. Fear of being rejected, of being forgotten, of not being loved. And this fear is what makes you say yes when you want to say no, smile when you're broken, explain yourself when no one asked. You become the emotional emergency button for the people around you. Always ready, always accessible, always the first person to be called when someone needs to vent their frustrations. And the cruelest part is that these same people often disappear when you need something. They're accustomed to your strength, your dedication, and believe you won't break. But you do, just silently. And silence in this context is not peace. It's repressed pain. It's the sound of emotional exhaustion from someone tired of being everyone's support and never having a place of their own. But it's also the beginning of something greater, because it's from this silence that consciousness is born. When you stop trying to be understood, you begin to understand yourself. When you give up trying to be accepted, you begin to accept yourself. Osho said that the common man's mind is a slave to opinions. It seeks approval like someone seeking air, and so never truly breathes. But the awakened being finds freedom in solitude, finds power in silence, finds identity in no. And perhaps you are exactly at that point, on the threshold between continuing to please or finally choosing yourself. It's an uncomfortable place, I know. It's strange to realize you no longer know who you are without the role of caregiver, good friend, the one who's always there. But this confusion is a sign of healing. Chaos comes before clarity. Silence comes before peace. The moment you fall silent isn't the end. It's the beginning. Because while you speak to be accepted, your true self remains trapped. But when you fall silent and observe, something within you awakens. And it's in this awakening that you realize how much you've given your energy to those who never deserved it. You begin to see the patterns, the cycles, the subtle manipulations, the people who only get close when they need you, the ones who disappear when you impose limits, the ones who make you feel guilty for taking care of yourself. You begin to see all this clearly, and the power shifts. Osho said that true strength lies not in reacting, but in witnessing. What breaks you is not what others do, it's how much you allow it to affect you. So maybe today is the day to stop being predictable, to let silence speak for you. Because silence disconcerts those who only understand noise. It shows that you are no longer controllable. It shows that you will no longer get lost trying to explain yourself. And yes, some people will walk away. But what goes with silence was never yours. The journey of self-discovery begins when you understand that you don't have to be everything to everyone, that there's power in not responding, in not justifying, in simply being. When the world tries to provoke you and you choose silence, you take control of your energy. And in that moment, no one can break you. If this excerpt made sense to you, comment here. I choose myself in silence. These words seal your decision to stop seeking approval and start living consciously. Protecting your energy isn't selfish. It's spiritual intelligence. This is perhaps one of the hardest truths to accept, especially when you've been taught that putting yourself first is an act of coldness. From an early age, you learned to deny yourself to maintain peace, to blame yourself when you said no, to feel responsible for the pain of others. And so, little by little, you surrendered parts of yourself to sustain bonds that only existed because you gave in. But there comes a point where the price of approval becomes too high, because to be accepted, you end up having to abandon yourself. And when that happens, the soul begins to scream silently. Osho said that silence is not absence, it is total presence. When you fall silent, you are not running away, you are returning within to the only place where no one can break you. Silence is not emptiness, it is plenitude. It is the space between one thought and another, where the truth appears unvarnished. But the world we live in fears this space. Noise has become an addiction, distraction, an escape. People need to speak, post, justify, express their opinions, because silence confronts them. And when you choose to be silent, you become a mirror that shows others how much they depend on noise to feel alive. Many will mistake your silence for indifference. Others will call it arrogance. But what they don't understand is that your silence isn't an absence. It's a conscious choice to no longer fuel chaos. This is where spiritual intelligence is born, when you understand that reacting to everything is giving away your power, that every time you explain yourself to someone who doesn't want to understand you, you're wasting energy that should be used to strengthen yourself. Silence is your invisible shield. It doesn't attack, but it also doesn't allow itself to be harmed. Have you ever noticed how the world constantly pressures you to justify yourself? It's as if the value of your existence depends on your ability to explain your decisions. But true awakening happens when you realize you owe nothing to anyone but self-consistency. Protecting your energy doesn't mean shutting yourself down or becoming cold. It means understanding that every word, every reaction, every explanation has an energetic cost. And the more you offer without awareness, the more you deplete yourself. There's a kind of guilt that creeps in when you start protecting yourself. It whispers that you're being selfish, that you're disappointing people, that you're pushing yourself away. But this guilt doesn't come from your core. It comes from your conditioning. It comes from years of being rewarded for pleasing and punished for asserting yourself. And that's where silence becomes revolutionary. Because when you choose not to respond, you're breaking a cycle of emotional dependence. You're showing the universe that you'd rather be whole than accepted. Osho said that a human being's greatest strength is the ability to observe without getting involved. And silence is the deepest practice of this observation. When you become silent, something within you begins to see beyond words, beyond appearances. You begin to feel the intentions behind every gesture, the weight behind every look. And it is in this silent perception that wisdom is born. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of consciousness, but not everyone will understand. Many will be bothered by your new state. They'll accuse you of being distant. They'll say you've changed. And indeed you have. You've stopped explaining yourself. You've stopped giving unlimited access to those who never truly listened to you. Your silence will be uncomfortable for those who have always fed off your energy. But it will also be liberating for you. For the first time, you'll taste the freedom that comes from not needing to be understood. There's something profoundly healing about simply observing without reacting. You begin to see that much of your conflict didn't exist outside of you. It existed within. The external noise merely echoed the internal chaos. When you become silent, the mirror clears, and you see who you truly are. Osho said, "The mind is noise, the self is silence. And when you understand this, you begin to realize that every attempt to prove something is actually an escape from yourself. The modern world calls this cooling off, but what really happens is that you stop getting lost in other people's emotions. You learn to be at peace even when there's turmoil all around. And this is true spiritual freedom, not relying on others' behavior to maintain your balance. This is where spiritual intelligence manifests, when you choose serenity over reaction, observation over conflict, silence over approval. You begin to realize that silence doesn't isolate you, it protects you. It creates a sacred boundary between what's yours and what belongs to others. Within this space, you regain your life force, your focus, your clarity. The world tries to pull you back into the noise, but something inside you no longer responds. You realize that reacting is a waste of light, that true power lies in remaining present, even when everything tries to pull you away. So when someone tries to provoke you, remember, silence is not an escape. It's a return. It's a return to consciousness, to peace, to truth. It's there in this space of stillness that you rediscover yourself and grow stronger, because no one can break a heart that has learned to listen to itself. No one can manipulate a mind that has learned to observe itself. And no one can steal the peace of someone who has found shelter within themselves. If this excerpt resonated with you, if you somehow felt the power of silence between the lines, comment here. I am total presence. These 3 words are a reminder that your silence is not weakness. It is the highest form of spiritual power. The truth is, the more predictable you become, the easier it is for the world to use you. People learn your patterns, perceive your triggers, and understand exactly what they need to say to get you to react the way they want. It's almost an invisible game of emotional manipulation. You believe you're being empathetic, understanding, but in reality you're being guided by subtle threads of expectation and guilt. It's as if your mind has been programmed to always react the same way, with explanations, justifications, defenses. And the worst part is, the more you do this, the more predictable you become. Predictability is the open door through which control enters. Osho said the mind loves patterns. It feels safe when it knows what to expect, and that's why so many people around you seem to feed off your repetition. They know that if they push you hard enough, you'll give in. That if they blame you, you'll justify yourself. That if they cry, you'll feel responsible. It's a silent, almost hypnotic cycle that repeats itself until the day you wake up and realize it's not that people are controlling you, it's that you're still responding automatically. Predictability breeds use because it creates emotional dependence. The other person doesn't have to deal with their own shadows. They just need to press the right button and you react. It's control disguised as a relationship. And that's precisely where silence becomes a spiritual tool. When you stop reacting, the pattern breaks. When you observe instead of responding, the game ends. The other person doesn't know what to do with your silence because your silence is unpredictable. It disarms, disconcerts, and confuses. It's the space where power changes hands. But there's something even deeper behind this predictability: guilt. Guilt is the invisible force that keeps you in this role. You believe you need to resolve, fix, and reconcile. That it's your responsibility to keep everything in balance. That true love is the kind that endures everything, understands everything, and always forgives. And that's why, even when you're exhausted, you keep trying. Because you feel guilty choosing to rest. You feel guilty imposing limits. You feel guilty prioritizing yourself. Osho said that guilt is the most refined mechanism of control of the human mind. It makes you believe you're wrong for being who you are, for feeling what you feel, for desiring peace. And it's precisely this guilt that traps you in the role of always being the strong, the understanding, the available. You don't realize it, but guilt turns you into a hostage to your own kindness. And this is a subtle prison, because it seems like a virtue. You pride yourself on your empathy, your patience, your surrender, but silently, you're emptying yourself. There comes a time when you begin to realize that the love that demands your sacrifice isn't love, it's dependence. And it's at that moment that silence emerges as liberation. Conscious silence is the moment you decide to no longer react impulsively. It's the moment you observe the old pattern trying to pull you back, but you choose not to give in. And that choice is a turning point, because when you stop reacting, the other person loses control. And when the other person loses control, your power returns. But the silence that liberates is not the silence of those who flee. It is the silence of those who awaken. Osho said that consciousness observes, and the pattern dissolves. Consciousness doesn't fight, it illuminates. And that's what happens when you begin to observe your reactions clearly. You begin to perceive the exact moment the trigger appears, the emotion rises, and the mind wants to act. But instead of getting lost in it, you breathe and observe. That small interval between stimulus and reaction is where freedom resides. Most people never experience this space because they're always reacting, always stuck in emotional urgency. But when you experience conscious silence, you realize the power was there all along, that no one ever truly controlled you, you just hadn't realized how predictable you were. And when you become unpredictable, the world changes around you. The people who manipulated you move away. The situations that drained you lose their power, and a new reality begins to form. Conscious silence is the pause that disarms. It's the moment when the mind, accustomed to noise, finds itself faced with emptiness and doesn't know how to act. And it is precisely in this emptiness that the true self emerges. Pure consciousness, living presence. Osho said that silence is the bridge between the mind and the being. When you become silent, you cross this bridge, and in crossing it you realize you no longer need to defend yourself. That strength lies not in defeating others, but in not allowing others to determine your inner state. But this requires courage, because conscious silence is uncomfortable at first. It exposes how dependent you were on approval, control, and immediate feedback. The ego screams, wants to react, wants to explain, but the soul observes. And the more you sustain this observation, the more you realize that external control only existed because there was internal chaos. Silence reorganizes, cleanses, transforms. It breaks the cycle of guilt and predictability. It restores your right to be whole. And perhaps now, as you listen to this, a part of you begins to understand that there is nothing more powerful than serenity. That true self-mastery lies not in speaking louder, but in not needing to speak. That freedom lies not in saying everything you think, but in not being a slave to the urge to say it. This is what Osho called awareness, the state in which the pattern dissolves simply because you see it clearly. So, allow yourself to observe. When the urge to react comes, choose silence. When guilt tries to pull you back, breathe. When others want to test you, simply bear witness. Silence is not absence, it is strength. It is there, in this space of inner stillness, that the world ceases to control you and you begin, finally, to become the center of your own life. If what you've felt so far has brought you clarity, comment here. I choose to break the pattern. These words are a reminder that freedom begins when you stop reacting and start observing. Now that you're beginning to understand the power of silence, it's time to put it into practice. Not just as a pretty concept, but as a real experience felt in your skin, lived in your body, transformative in your soul. Silence isn't a spiritual theory, it's a state of presence that needs to be experienced. It's at this point that knowledge transforms into wisdom. Osho said, "Sit for 10 minutes in silence before responding." The world changes when you observe, not when you react. And maybe you haven't realized it yet, but most of your energy is spent reacting, explaining, justifying, trying to fix what never depended on you. So here's a challenge. For the next 24 hours, don't explain yourself. That's all. Whenever someone asks you something, whenever a situation seems to demand an immediate response, simply say, "Today I prefer silence," and observe the power of that choice. At first, it will feel strange, uncomfortable, even wrong. You will feel the urge to justify, to clarify, to defend yourself. But that's exactly where the exercise lies, because conscious silence isn't passivity, it's mastery. It's the moment when you take back control of your own energy. You'll notice that people aren't used to this kind of response. Silence is disconcerting. It dismantles the invisible game of emotional manipulation. When someone waits for your reaction and it doesn't come, the other person finds themselves in a mirror, and the mirror reflects their own intentions. It's at this moment that the power shifts. When you choose silence, the other person is forced to deal with themselves. And make no mistake, the initial discomfort is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of healing. It's your ego trying to regain control, trying to convince you that silence is dangerous, that you'll appear cold, distant, arrogant. But what's really happening is the opposite. Silence brings you closer to the truth. It reconnects you to your essence. to the space within you that doesn't need to prove anything. When you become silent, you begin to listen, and what you hear isn't the world, it's your own consciousness. Osho said that silence is the sound of the soul. It is in this state that the mind loses its grip and the being awakens. Therefore, this challenge is more than an exercise, it is a portal. During these 24 hours, you will carefully observe what happens inside and outside of you. Observe how your mind reacts when someone provokes you. Observe how your body responds when silence replaces speech. Observe what you feel when you no longer try to convince anyone. This observation is the beginning of transformation. At first, you may notice a void. It's the space previously occupied by the need to respond. But soon, this emptiness becomes peace. And from this peace, strength is born. You'll begin to notice details that previously went unnoticed. The tone of voice of the person speaking to you, the intention behind their words, the small movements in the environment. Silence makes you more aware. And when awareness awakens, the illusion dissolves. This exercise will also reveal who truly respects you and who only approaches you when they can provoke you. Silence is a natural filter. It separates what's true from what's self-interested. People who truly love you will understand your situation. Those who feed off your energy will be bothered, try to make you react, and try to pull you back into your old role. This is how you'll recognize who connected with your being and who connected with your behavior. You'll also discover how much silence protects you. It prevents impulsive words from becoming permanent wounds. It gives you time to see things as they are, not as emotions want them to be. Osho said that the unconscious person speaks first and regrets later. The conscious person observes first and often realizes they don't even need to speak. This is the power of silence. It doesn't erase conflicts, it dissolves them. Throughout this challenge, you may feel something inside you shift. You might notice that some conversations become unnecessary, that some relationships become fragile, that your own pace slows down. It's as if the world still moves, but you no longer need to run along with it. You begin to experience time differently, lighter, more present, more truthful. This is the beginning of inner freedom. And if at any moment the silence weighs on you, remember, the weight comes from the habit of explaining yourself. When this habit falls, what remains is lightness. There is nothing to prove, nothing to justify, nothing to defend. There is only presence, and presence is power. Osho said that when you are fully present, the whole world changes shape. And he was right, because the world is merely a reflection of your inner state. During these 24 hours, you're not just refraining from speaking, you're training your awareness. You're choosing peace over approval. You're saying to life, I don't need to react to exist. This is the kind of spiritual discipline that changes a human being's vibration. And the more you practice, the more you realize that silence isn't the absence of communication. It's the deepest form of dialogue between you and existence. At the end of the day, you might realize that the world didn't need your explanation, that people moved on with their stories, that the universe didn't collapse, that the peace you felt was more real than any justification. It's at that moment that you understand. Life goes on even when you're silent. But within you, something is reborn. Serenity begins to replace fear. Awareness replaces reaction. And silence transforms into a living force. If you've made it this far and feel like this challenge is for you, write in the comments. Today, I prefer silence. This phrase is the seed of your new state of presence, the reminder that true strength comes when you choose stillness over noise. Silence is not a wall, it is a sacred boundary. This is perhaps one of the greatest spiritual confusions of our time. People confuse limits with coldness, introspection with detachment, self-knowledge with isolation. But silence, when born of awareness, doesn't separate you from the world. It reconnects you to it in a much purer and truer way. Osho said, compassion without awareness becomes attachment. Awareness without compassion becomes hardness. Balance is true silence. This is the essence of spiritual maturity, finding the point where love doesn't require sacrifice and peace doesn't require solitude. When you begin to protect your energy, it's natural for some to accuse you of distancing yourself. They'll say you've changed, that you're cold, that you're not the same anymore. And in fact, you're not, because those who live in a state of consciousness don't need to prove love by destroying themselves. True love isn't the kind that drains you to exhaustion, it's the kind that lets you breathe. Silence teaches you exactly this, that it's possible to love without losing yourself, to help without being annulled, to be present without being invaded. But the world doesn't know how to deal with spiritual boundaries. We live in a culture that romanticizes exhaustion and confuses surrender with submission. People call it kindness, when in reality, it's a fear of rejection. And that's why your silence will bother us. It shows that you're no longer willing to continue offering what others consume without realizing it. It shows that you now choose to love with presence, not neediness. This is where the balance between compassion and awareness becomes vital. Pure compassion is light. It understands, embraces, and forgives. But without awareness, this light blinds. You begin to justify toxic behaviors in the name of love, accept the unacceptable, and nullify yourself by believing you're being spiritual. This isn't compassion. It's attachment in disguise. On the other hand, when there's awareness without compassion, the heart hardens. You become critical, closed, and distant. True spiritual wisdom occurs when these two forces are balanced. When you can keep your heart open but your energy field protected. Silence is not the absence of feeling. It is the deepest presence there is. It's when you look at someone and instead of reacting to what they say, you perceive what they feel. It's when you can see beyond the words because you are connected to the essence. Osho called this real listening, a kind of attention that arises only when the mind is still. When you listen from this place, you realize that much of what the other person says is not about you, but about the chaos within them. And that's why silence is so powerful. It prevents you from entering into emotional storms that don't belong to you. There's a difference between being silent out of fear and being silent out of wisdom. The silence of fear is heavy, shrunken, and full of anguish. The silence of wisdom is light, firm, and peaceful. It doesn't try to hide, it just observes. When you're in this state, love flows naturally. You no longer need to prove anything. Compassion manifests not as submission, but as understanding. You understand that each person speaks from their own level of consciousness, and that trying to change another by force is futile. The only real transformation begins in the silence of one's own presence. It's important to understand that silence is also a mirror. It shows others how they treat you. It shows who respects you and who only values you when they can use you. Silence reveals intentions, because those who truly love you aren't frightened by your stillness. Those who love you don't constantly demand explanations. They understand space and seclusion. Those who feed off your imbalance will try to provoke you because your silence exposes them. Osho said that conscious love is a calm flame. It illuminates, but does not burn. And that's what silence teaches you, to keep the flame burning without letting the fire consume you. Loving consciously is knowing when to approach and when to retreat. It's respecting the natural rhythm of things, without forcing connections, without holding anyone back, without begging for presence. When you live in this state, peace becomes your natural way of being. But to reach this point, you must free yourself from the need to be understood, because silence won't be understood by everyone. Some will mistake your withdrawal for rejection, others will project their fears onto you, and that's okay. Osho taught that when a disciple begins to understand silence, the world calls them strange, because consciousness is something that bothers those who live asleep. So, accept not being understood. Silence is the price of lucidity. You'll realize that the more conscious you become, the simpler life becomes. You stop arguing over small things, getting involved in dramas, and trying to convince others. Silence puts you in a state of constant observation. You notice people, but don't engage. You empathize, but don't harbor it. You love, but don't abandon yourself, and that changes everything. Inner peace begins precisely at that point, the moment love ceases to be a contract and becomes a free choice. This is why silence is a sacred boundary. It's the space between what builds you and what destroys you. Within it, you learn to recognize what deserves your energy and what needs to be let go. There is no true spirituality without boundaries, because boundaries are what sustain presence. Without them, love becomes attachment, empathy becomes draining, compassion becomes pain. So, when you feel the urge to speak just to be understood, remember, silence isn't distancing, it's protection. When others try to blame you for withdrawing, remember, silence isn't selfishness, it's discernment. When they call you cold, know that it's just a reflection of the discomfort of someone who doesn't know how to deal with someone who's found the balance between feeling and self-preservation. And if this message touched you, if you understood that silence is the bridge between compassion and awareness, comment here, "I am a sacred border." These words anchor what is most important in this journey, the reminder that true love does not require your abandonment, only your presence. When you choose silence over approval, the world loses its power to hurt you, because silence isn't absence, it's presence. It's not weakness, it's mastery. It's the point where you stop being a reflection of others' expectations and become the purest expression of your own truth. When you choose silence, you don't disappear. You appear, whole, rare, free. And it is in this freedom that true peace begins. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is ready for this transformation. You didn't watch this video by accident. Life always finds a way to deliver the right message at the right time. And if you stayed until the end, it's a sign that the silence is already calling you, guiding you to a new level of consciousness. And if this message resonated, if it awakened something within you, subscribe to the channel right now. Here, each video is a new stage in your spiritual awakening. Each word is an invitation to look within, understand the world, and free yourself from it without having to run away. Please leave your like too, not out of habit, but as a gesture of presence, a sign that you're aware of what you've just experienced here. Your support helps this message reach more people who, like you, are tired of explaining themselves and ready to live in silence and truth. And it doesn't stop there. The next video is already waiting for you. It's the natural continuation of this journey. Click on the video now and continue this journey with me. Your awakening is just beginning.